Hello, everybody. It's Wednesday evening around 7 o'clock Central. Oh, wow. Whatever video you're seeing right now isn't me live. It's like a fast version thing of everything that happened during the intro. I wonder if that's going to continue. That's my preview on vMix. Yeah, it is. It's actually what's being sent out. I'm going to keep going and let them fix it. Welcome to the Hang Up. It's Wednesday around 7 o'clock Central. I am Dillahunty, and we're going to talk a little bit about what I've been hung up on for at least for today, now that maybe the time loop is over. And then I'll bring my guest in. I went after, I'm probably going to get canceled because I dared to go after an African-American woman on Twitter who happens to be a terrible conservative, useless mouthpiece, which Laverne Spicer today put out a tweet suggesting that the Republicans did the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments with virtually no Democrat support, and the Democrats did Obamacare with virtually no Republican support, and then suggested, this was a story that none of us had been aware of. We hadn't been told about it at all, and that it shows that racism starts with Democrats. Now, it's extra funny to me because I hated history. Like when I was in high school, history class was probably the class that I hated the most. I didn't pay attention. I didn't get good grades. But since then, I have spent a great deal of time learning more and more and more about history and everything else. One of the things that Laverne seems to have skipped is the notion that the 13th, and 14th, and 15th Amendments, yes, those were really important. The Republican Party wasn't formed until 1854, just a couple of years before the Civil War. And then a couple of years after the Civil War, it was primarily Republicans in the northern states and primarily Democrats in the southern states, because the Democratic Party had been around since 1828. So they had a good, 30-year or so almost head start on them. After the Civil War was over, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments were passed, essentially Reformation. But Northern Republicans, after the passing of this, abandoned their liberal principles. Republicans at the time were the liberals and the Democrats were the conservative ones. And Republicans abandoned those liberal principles. They felt that they had done enough for Black Americans. They had become wealthy, these Northern Republicans, during the war. And when it came time to maintain that power and get a vote, they realized that most of the Black folk were living in the South and they were starting to lose that vote. So there was no sense, hey, haven't we done enough? Shouldn't we just be lauded forever? And because of a really terribly botched election that is only eclipsed by the most recent one because of the January 6th insurrection, there was the 1877 Compromise, which essentially ended the Reformation and ended that version of the Republican and Democratic parties. Over time, between the 1877 end of Reformation, where the Compromise was basically saying, okay, the southern states will acknowledge, I think it's Rutherford B. Hayes as president, but you got to do this and you got to do this. And it put a stop to some of this and started the change in the parties. So not only does she need to ignore what happened just a few short years after those Reformation amendments were passed, but she also has to ignore the Great Depression, where Herbert Hoover essentially allowed it to happen. And that basically labeled the Republican Party as the party of the wealthy that doesn't care about the poor and the impoverished and those that are marginalized. And FDR came in with a landslide victory after campaigning primarily on let's fix this and talk about the welfare of the people. And then she also has to ignore the Civil Rights Act of 1964 brought about by LBJ and the Democrats. In order to paint the Republicans as a reasonable party that is good for minorities, Laverne had to go back 150 years to just a handful of years after the party was formed. At the end of this, I'm sorry, you're right. Reconstruction, not reformation. Wow, that was dumb of me. I typoed the hell out of that. Thank you for the person in chat who's making me look smarter than I actually was. I had my notes down. So the 1877 compromise ended Reconstruction, not Reformation. See, when you do so much religion stuff, the Protestant Reformation just sticks in your head, stuff like that. But she had to go back 150 years to try to make the Republican Party look like it was reasonable. That's like saying that because I pooped my diapers when I was a baby, that I'm still pooping them now, that nothing has changed between now and then. I might be, you don't know, but you don't get to draw that conclusion right away. I might poop my diapers again somewhere down the road, but currently that's not the case. I also don't use a pacifier. I've put away childish things, at least for the time being. It's embarrassing that she portrayed all this as if we didn't know about it. And the truth is, she's probably right. Probably most people don't know what happened 150 years ago because there were people in there mocking people. Republicans are like, oh, yeah. Wait, you'll get the standard response about how the parties have switched their positions. Ha, ha, ha. Yes, that is the standard line. But you know why? Because that's the truth. When one party used to be the party of liberals and one party used to be the party of conservatives, and that changes over a 150-year period, it's not dishonest or a cop-out to point to that and correct it. And what is dishonest is to suggest that people should vote for Republicans now because of what they did 150 some odd years ago that was good for you then. I mean, what have you done for me lately? That's the question. Another thing happened, and it's unavoidable at this point. Shannon Q shared a clip of Jordan Peterson. We're not going to play the clip here because I don't feel like getting flagged for it. But he was in some sort of discussion about the value of women and about sexual assault against women. And I've watched the clip 2 or 3 times. He definitely noted in some context in this clip that the illegality and or concern for acts directed at women gain more attention on the basis of whether or not it outraged the men around that women. Now, what he didn't say was whether this was a good thing or a bad thing, or at least that wasn't included in the clip that I saw. And I don't want to misrepresent what he said, but I have to go back to the things that he said in the past. He's campaigned for traditional roles for men and women, and his failure to be clear means that he's talking about a woman's value and making declarations without any insight even to the fact that he is of questionable integrity or position when it comes to women's rights and men's rights. Now, I've listened to the clip multiple times, and I'm still not exactly sure what he's saying. And that's why I was glad that tonight, joining me here on the Hang Up, please help me welcome Eve Was Framed, because I want to get and share her perspective on not just being a woman in the world, which is a valuable one, but as an online activist and what her take is on Jordan Peterson. And then we will take your calls. So, hey,
hi.
Are you excited? So are you excited to go on vacation next week?
That's all I can think about, honestly. I'm so excited.
It's the closest to a real vacation I might get. So
yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. I was also excited about this, then the beach.
We'll get there. So you watched the clip and you had a take on it. And I just want to hear you take over. Tell people what you were thinking about this clip, the stuff that we all need to know, because people, they're oblivious. Men in particular are oblivious to what women deal with online. I remember somebody just the other day telling me, about they have a friend who carries around like Barbie doll heads in their pocket, because if they're at a bar and somebody comes up and says, hey, how about a little head? She can put one on the table. And it blew my mind, because who would say that? It's bizarre. But what's your take on the Jordan Peterson stuff?
Yeah. So I saw that clip, and what I gathered is that he was saying, sure, women have value and that should be enough to deter them from being assaulted. But he went on to say, but I don't think that's enough. And I think that we need to have, essentially he was saying we need to have the men around them be so enraged that other people are afraid to assault women because their boyfriend might get angry. And
Sure.
that's dragging the conversation backwards. If you're trying to help society progress with the idea that women have value on their own, not as property to men, but on their own, and that's reason enough to not harm them, then why are we dragging the conversation backwards and now trying to say, also, we should just make sure that people know their boyfriends are going to get mad too, and that should increase probability that they won't get assaulted. And
is there do you think there's I'm desperately trying to bend over. I don't know why I'm trying to bend over backwards. The guy is a buffoon and is wholly an unimpressive thinker from the day that I sat on stage with him on. But because it's a clip, I exercise some caution because it's possible that I could say something like this. I think it's a shame that we live in a world where a woman's worth is contingent upon how upset the men around them are at actions that are directed towards them. And that could easily be, without the it's a shame message at the front, it's factually correct. Is it? He could have just been stating this is the case rather than this is optimal. But I keep going back to what he keeps saying about traditional values. And your takeaway, I'm assuming, along with other people's, is that he's saying this is the way it ought to be.
Right. And that's my problem with Jordan Peterson in general, is that he feeds this rhetoric in a very sneaky way, because a lot of times he goes to, well, it's complicated, and, well, it's nuanced, and he doesn't come outright with what it seems to be that he's, with the group that he seems to be feeding with this sort of rhetoric, which is the traditional Christian value sort of position that, as we know, does not give women a position of value aside from their husband, aside from this hierarchy. I mean, he does go on the record about hierarchy. That is a part of his thing. And that's problematic, because I think if you're not in support fully of women being valuable enough on their own, and that should be what we're pushing, not saying your dad's going to get pissed, so that's why people shouldn't touch you, then you're still supporting that exact same pattern and patriarchal, not agenda is not the right word for it, but that same culture.
Whoops. I said, yeah, but I muted there as well. So when it's incredibly frustrating because, okay, hey, here we are on Matt's show, talking about what Jordan Peterson said about women.
Right.
What, in your view, and we didn't dig in and discuss all this, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you could just, if you could make a wish and have Jordan Peterson and me and whoever else understand something about what it's like to be a woman, to hear this at these times, what would it be?
I think it's just exhausting hearing men talk about women so much, and there's not a lot of listening. And I was trying to find that full clip with Jordan Peterson, because from what I gathered, I think that was an interview that he was conducting, so that's great. He was interviewing a woman, but this whole, it's laughable to me that he's on there like trying to discuss women being assaulted and how we can prevent it, instead of asking women, the ones who face this every day. I get death threats a decent amount because of my content, but I get told very often that I don't know what I can say on here because I don't want to get you demonetized or whatever.
But you can say whatever you want. But
right, I get told all the time that I should get raped, and it's always by men. And that's just a common, I think a lot of women that are content creators or that are online or in the public eye, that's kind of like the go-to insult. So then to hear men discussing in such a I wonder, that's interesting, it's complicated, it's nuanced. And it's like, it's not nuanced, it's not complicated. Women should be valuable enough on their own that we don't have to bring in all these other, maybe we should set up this to keep them from getting raped, maybe we should do this. because nobody's sitting around talking about should we stop men from being raped by making sure people know their girlfriend's going to get pissed or their mom's going to get pissed if you touch them. Like, that's just not even part of the conversation. So why are we now having this about women? I don't know. I guess that's like a long way of answering a question. I guess what I would like to communicate to men in general is more listening, less pondering your own ideas about these social constructs that us women have had to be oppressed under, and more acknowledgement, I think, of what we are still attempting to climb out of.
Yeah. It's been, I don't have a sister. I have a brother. He's my favorite person in the world. He's in chat. Hi. I love my mom, but my mom and I don't get along and see eye to eye and all that stuff. And I was raised predominantly with a Christian upbringing and with an authoritarian dad. I mean, there was a razor strap in the garage, and there were certain rules. You don't use certain language. Women are on a pedestal above. You don't hit women. You don't talk back to them. You don't any of that stuff. And all of it stemmed from a notion that this is what my dad's view of what God wanted. If you're going to be the head of the household and the woman is under you, you have to, there's certain obligations you need to do. Now, I remember the first time I saw someone who began to understand and value women after they had a daughter. And I was like, don't get me wrong, I am glad that any father of any child values them. And I am glad when anyone's eyes become opened to the value of somebody else. I didn't need to have a daughter to understand that I wouldn't want my daughter to deal with the fuckers that every woman I know has to deal with. The people who, it's like the people who are like, they were anti-gay until they had a child or a niece or a nephew who were gay, and then all of a sudden they changed their mind. And I think that it could be viewed as you were anti-woman until you had a woman you truly cared about. And what's odd is that wasn't your mother. That wasn't the woman you had a child with. That was just the child. It was like, oh, my daughter opened my eyes. It's like you didn't value. And I think it's true that a lot of them didn't value their partners, their girlfriends, wives, etc. Because that was a conquest situation for them. That was I set up this target. I managed to acquire her. She is now mine. And then it's only when the daughter is produced that it really hits them. And I don't get it.
It's the lack of, I mean, that's when it comes back to the value of a woman being, because she's human. And that's what. But there's a disconnect where I think a lot of those sorts of men are not able to connect the dots and see that women are humans. To them, it's like they're this whole separate thing. And so until they become valuable to them within the construct of their own life, like a daughter, where they can recognize their own humanity within that child, and so now they can see that reflected into the women around them, they don't see women as human. And that's what has to be addressed. Not Jordan Peterson saying, well, maybe, dads and brothers should get pissed if somebody gets assaulted and that's what should be a defense against women. No, recognizing the humanity and continuing to push that and continuing to find that connectedness instead of going back to women are property and women don't have value until you can see them as part of yourself because they're your daughter, your sister, your mother.
Yeah. There's a frustrating aspect to it. And it's not like I'm hearing any of this for the first time. Early in my involvement with the atheist community, there was a lot of discussion about increasing diversity. And, because we didn't want the atheist community to be, a bunch of old white dudes with beards patting each other on the back about not believing in God anymore. And they were like, why aren't we attracting women to this? And I'm like, first of all, why are you asking me? But it was the involvement and the courage of some women to be willing to put up with more bullshit than they ever should have in order to help create a space so that the women who weren't likely to put up with as much bullshit would also potentially feel welcome. And then eventually the atheist community got big enough where we can have all kinds of infighting and divide up into teams and different groups that aren't based just on gender or race or whatever else we picked. But it was viewed by some as mission drift. Like, oh, if we're reaching out to women or the Hispanic community or the African American community, if we're reaching out to these, that's mission drift because we should only be focused on this God issue. And I'm so happy that despite a number of different problems in moving from A to B, I think we're better now than we used to be. But it's good to have a reminder on a regular basis that we're not doing as well as we could.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, definitely doing better. But the word atheist, I hear so many people, because I have a large community of people that are just now leaving religion. And so many of the messages I get are women telling me I'm afraid to come out as atheist because that term has such negative connotations, the stereotype. It's like these older white men. And that's what you see when you hear the word atheist. And so I do think it is absolutely important to keep pushing those voices or whatever, if you want to call it a mission driven or whatever. I think that's what makes the negative stereotypes go away, is when you invite more voices and you have more faces. And because we do exist. I mean, there's a lot of women atheists. We are here, but a lot of them are afraid to say that.
Yeah, it's somebody in chat just remarked on basically the thing that started off Elevator Gate. By the person in chat said, I remember when Rebecca Watson was lambasted for giving an offhand, please don't do this, it makes me uncomfortable, and atheist men's lost their collective shit. Yeah, it was sad. I mean, I knew Rebecca pretty well at the time. We haven't interacted much over the last few years, but that was really bizarre because when you read the whole story of everything that happened, the only thing that happened is that she was made uncomfortable by somebody's action. She told the story about it and specifically said, guys, don't do that. And Richard Dawkins decided that we needed Grandpa Atheist to chime in and wrote his kind of Dear Muslima post. And it caused more problems than ever. And he eventually apologized for that. Whether or not it was done sufficiently or not isn't relevant. But for the people who are still taking Richard's really bad take side on that issue, you're now alone because he doesn't share that. But we've got some callers. There were people in chat who, as always, are doing and saying things instead of calling in to ask the questions. We've got a couple people waiting. I want to make sure we can take calls. But if any of you in chat have these questions, like where you'd want to interact on something, the phone number is right there below the screen, 720-619-2288. Are you ready to be under fire now, Eve?
I'm excited. Can't wait.
All right. This one is directed to me, so I'll apologize if I end up doing almost all the talking to begin with, but I don't think it needs to be that case. We have Gerard from Connecticut, pronouns are he, him, an agnostic theist who has some objection to my skepticism. So welcome, Gerard. What am I doing wrong?
Hello. Well, before that, I just want to say I like both of your takes on the issue you were just talking about. As for the skepticism, so I have a couple notes here I just want to get started with. It kind of starts with me when people say, there's a saying that saying I don't know is the honest position, and sometimes they say we should default to that position, saying I don't know if we don't have the information.
For clarity, you called in about my skepticism. I'm one of the people who says I don't know is often the right answer and often the default answer. So you're saying that position is incorrect?
I'm saying that I don't agree that we should hang on to the stance that we don't know.
Well, if you
or
don't
that we should
know,
default to that stance if we have more information to go on.
well, okay, I'll let you continue, and then we'll pick something and try to sort this out, because my position is, if you don't know, the correct position, the right position to assert is that you don't know. But go ahead.
Okay. So what I'm trying to get is that it's not necessarily about knowledge, but belief. So, for example, I think it's natural for us to have beliefs without, even if we don't have a high standard of evidence for them. And to go back to the I don't know thing, I think it's also honest to say I don't know, but I believe.
Sure.
That
Now, I understand.
Even if we don't know, we still make beliefs.
Hang on, because we're equating things here. I understand that with regard to epistemology, knowledge is a subset of belief. But when I say that the right answer is often I don't know, what that's saying is I do not believe that this is true. But that doesn't mean you're saying you believe that it's false. It means you're not convinced. So, for example, for the proposition some God exists, I do not believe that that position is true. But anyway, as long as we're clear that when I say I don't know is often the right answer, I'm using a colloquialism to basically say I am not convinced of either proposition.
Right.
Right.
But you would also say, would you say that we shouldn't believe unless we have a high standard of evidence?
I'm saying you can't believe until your standard of evidence has been met, and that
right.
you should always have a standard of evidence that errs in favor of things more likely being true than allowing false beliefs to exist.
Right. So that's kind of where I deviate, because I think
you're okay with having a bunch of false beliefs?
I'm okay with having a belief, even if I'm not, even if it's not completely to a high standard.
Okay. So, like, what's a belief that you have? What's a belief that you have where you have a low standard for it?
Well, it's more so that there should be a high standard. So, for example, one of the beliefs I have, it has to do with, like abstract, for example, metaphysical things, like abstract objects. Like, for example, I think the universe is mostly mathematical. Like, let's just say that, right? That we live in a mathematical universe. Let's just say that, and that's something that should have like a very high standard of evidence.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, what does that mean?
What do you mean when you say the universe is mostly mathematical? Because I agree that mathematics can be used to describe virtually any aspect of the universe, but that doesn't make the universe mathematical. Well, just like I can use language to describe the universe, but that doesn't make the universe a dictionary or linguistic.
Right. Well, it comes down to the fact that when we look at the physics, right, the laws of physics, they're written in mathematics. When we get down to the very, bare basics of reality, the electrons, all those things, when you think of what they are, it's not so much that they're these like, for example, a particle isn't just like a ball, or like a very small ball, even though that's kind of sometimes how we think of them, especially electrons, where they're only described by basically mathematics. They're only described by where they place in these in our mathematics.
I'm sorry, Gerard, but you've completely lost me. And what you're doing now is talking about how we use mathematics to describe something, and that doesn't make the universe mathematic. So, but you called in to suggest that I have standards of evidence that are too high. Maybe it'd be better if if you'd give an example of something where my standard of evidence is too high.
I would say in God claims.
Okay. Gods are, do you think there are gods that aren't supernatural?
No. No.
Okay. My standards.
Gods are supernatural.
So sure. So let's just do it for that kind of broadly. You think that my standards of evidence for accepting claims of the supernatural are too high? Have you or has anyone that you're aware of demonstrated that any proposition at all about the supernatural as true? Has anybody demonstrated that there is anything supernatural, that it can interact with reality in a detectable way, that it can in fact be detected? How is the supernatural testable and falsifiable?
So I think we can believe in the supernatural and have some evidence for it.
I'm asking. That's not what I asked.
Yep.
That's not what I asked. I don't care if somebody can be or can believe. This is about whether or not someone should believe. You're saying that my standards of evidence for the supernatural are too high. And I'm saying that my standards of evidence for the supernatural are, until someone can demonstrate the existence of the supernatural and that it can interact with reality and this can be detected, I don't see what the justification is for claiming that anything supernatural exists. My standard of evidence for it is such. Would you agree that two different claims, like let's say two different gods that are mutually exclusive and yet both supernatural, cannot both be true?
I would say there could only be one if we say there's like a being that makes the universe.
Sure.
I think that's
if you have two different religions that are proposing two different gods that supposedly created the universe, and they're not talking about the same being, then it must be the case that at least one of them cannot exist, right? They cannot both be, both statements cannot be true simultaneously.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Give me a standard of evidence for how we would accept the one that's true and reject the one that's not true. Because when you say my standards of evidence when you say my standards of evidence are too high, my standard of evidence exists so that I'm not forced to accept both of those things, putting myself in the position of believing mutually contradictory positions. So what's the standard of evidence that rules in the right God and rules out the wrong God?
Well, it has to interact with reality in some way, because reality is all that we know. So, for example, if there's a God if there's like a proposition that says God created humans that could behave morally or immorally, then that would that at least we at least have some idea of morality and stuff. But if there was like a God posited that that wasn't true, there were no agents in the universe, then we could knock that one out. So it does have to.
No, sir. I'm afraid that's not the case. If somebody proposes a God that exists alongside humans and somebody proposes a God that exists without humans, then the existence of humans does actually exclude the one, but it doesn't demonstrate that this one is true. I'm saying that my standards of evidence. I'm saying that my standards of evidence exist so that I do not accept false gods in order to include a true God. And I wanted to know what standard of evidence would do that. And you started by saying it must interact with reality I'm assuming in a detectable way. Where is the demonstration that anything supernatural has ever interacted with reality?
Well, if you ask me, I would point to abstract objects or philosophical arguments.
Yeah. How is that evidence of the supernatural? Pick an abstract argument, pick an abstract object, and explain to me how this is proof that the supernatural interacts with the reality in a detectable way.
Honestly, that would go back to the mathematics that I was talking about earlier.
I'm sorry, but mathematics.
Let me just make one statement.
No, Gerard, stop. I'm trying to make this as clear as possible. You called in to basically say I'm too fucking skeptical. And I've bent over backwards here and said, okay, let's talk about what my standards are. You think they're too high. I would like to have a standard that includes true things and excludes false things. And your standard then became it interacts with reality. And then I asked what was an example? And you said abstract objects. But first of all, abstract objects don't exist. They're mental constructs. Second of all, I then asked, how does an abstract object demonstrate that the supernatural interacts with reality? You don't get to say it goes back to mathematics. How can you demonstrate?
Well, that's just for me.
No, reality. None of this is. No, stop talking. When you say that's just for me, I don't give a fuck if you have some personal esoteric construct of reality. Truth isn't true just for you. If you're going to call in to say that, you might as well have said, stop talking, Gerard. You might as well have called in to say, Matt, you're too skeptical. That's my view on it. And it's because it's my view on it. Ha, ha, ha. Well, congratulations. Nobody asked you. Reality needs to be demonstrated.
To make an argument.
Reality needs to be demonstrated, not asserted. Do you have a way to demonstrate the supernatural interaction of anything?
Yes, in a way.
Cool. Go for it.
Well, space and time, right? We say abstract objects are within space and time, right? Outside of space and time. That's the general.
No.
Well,
they're abstractions. It's not like they exist outside of space and time. They just do not exist as discrete objects within space and time. They're abstractions.
Well, that depends on, again, if you believe abstract objects actually exist or not. You don't.
Abstract objects do not exist. Do you have a way of demonstrating that abstract objects exist? There's a reason why we call them abstract.
Because space and time are fundamentally mathematical. And
yeah, I apologize, Gerard, but I'm just gonna let you go here, and you can run off and claim victory, and you can say whatever you want, because at this point you are not making any sense, and it's no longer good for the show. It's not helping anybody. You're not able to demonstrate anything, and you just keep going back to assertions about abstractions and mathematics. I now understand that you think I'm too skeptical, and I think you're too gullible. So we're at an impasse. There we go.
Yep.
I'm going to bring in another caller specifically so that you can interact without getting a headache, I hope. David in California, pronouns are he, him, wants to evidently defend Jordan Peterson or get clarification on our stance. So go for it.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Eve. So I was just kind of curious about, I have not seen yet the actual clip of Jordan Peterson and what he said about apparently one of the ways you can avoid assault of women is by reminding men that they'll get beat up by other men. And I was just kind of wondering, clarification-wise, do you know if he was saying that that's like the primary way that you can avoid assault, or is that just one way? Because to the extent he's saying that's one way, I kind of felt like I don't really see the difference between telling somebody, also reminding them you can go to jail if you assault a woman. And I was just wondering what's wrong with that. Is
it? So from my recollection of what I saw, he was bringing it up as he first mentioned, yes, I acknowledge that women's value on its own should be enough for men to not assault them, rape them, whatever. I don't remember exactly how he said it. He said, but I'm wondering, he did the thing that he does, if maybe a larger, I don't know if he said larger incentive, he was bringing that in on the same note as saying that it should be enough that they're humans. That was his next thing, is maybe what we need to do to really ward off threats is to have this kind of be like a defense against women, is to have it known that you're going to piss off the men around them. So no, I don't think he was saying that's the only thing, or I don't know if he was saying it's the number one thing. He wasn't very clear. It was the way he said it. It was the context in which he brought it up. It was what he was responding to that made it offensive.
And so was there something then about the context in which he says it, where he's kind of dismissing a lot of other just, hey, why don't you just be a good person ways you could avoid assault, instead, just like you said, I think in the beginning, kind of just putting it back on being all about men?
So it was in direct response to the woman that he was speaking with, saying that the sexual revolution, one of the things that brought about that was positive was it allowed women to be seen as full humans, and that they had value on their own, and that's why they shouldn't be assaulted. So he was piggybacking on that, and now had to bring up basically turning them back into property again. Sure, that's cool that happened. Sure, it's cool that women are starting to get more value, but also then he had to take the spin. I wonder if maybe if we still take them back to the place where they're property, if that might be helpful. And it doesn't matter if that's technically helpful. Sure, it's technically helpful that you go to jail and you get punished if you get caught, if you rape somebody.
And I guess
but that's not the issue that's needing to be addressed here. We have consequences, we have legal consequences and all that, but that won't stop all rape. Neither will the threat of somebody's dad or brothers. What if they don't have that?
I think my question is just, is telling someone, hey, you shouldn't do this because other dudes are going to beat you up, is that inherently implying something about women being property? Because I'm not putting that connection together, so I'm just wondering how you are.
It is furthering a rhetoric that has been around forever, because instead of teaching men, hey, you shouldn't do this because it's fucked up, you're saying you shouldn't do this because you might have other men pissed at you, which is, when you say that, you are automatically diminishing the value that a woman carries on her own to not be assaulted, aside from any man getting pissed about it. That should not be the reasoning.
So it may not be a perfect analogy to try to reverse this a little bit, but so then if you were to say something like, hey, as a woman, you shouldn't assault a man because not necessarily other women will beat you up, but maybe they'll ostracize you from their social circles or something like that. But basically, in essence, you're saying, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Finish your thought.
Thanks. I was just thinking, so if basically at its most basic, you're saying, hey, women don't assault men because other women will punish you in some way. Is that then also not a good argument because you're somehow implying property rights between men and women, or?
First, that would be a poor argument because nobody would say that. But I do think that would be a poor argument, and I do think that would have a problem. That's not being said or done, which is, I think, adds to my point. No one's going up to women saying, well, we could stop men getting assaulted if we make it clear that other women are going to get pissed, because we don't have to do that. We just say it's wrong to assault people. But then when we start specifically talking about women, now suddenly we're bringing the threat of other men into the conversation.
Yeah, I do agree that there's a larger problem that you're right. Nobody is saying that. Nobody would even think to say, oh, women are going to get angry and beat you up. And that is a sign of some, there's not equal footing here. But just hypothetically,
go ahead.
Just hypothetically speaking, in that world, which I agree with you does not exist, that is not happening. But were that to be an argument made, is there something about making that argument that you think would be an implication then that men are now the property of women, in the way that you're saying that men making that argument is an implication that women are the property of men?
If you're making the argument that women shouldn't assault men because other women will get pissed, then yes, you are saying that they shouldn't assault men because other women will get pissed. And that is a poor reason, because you are then making the men seem like the only reason they have value is because of women. But we don't have this isn't a matriarchal society. So that's really hard it's really hard to look at it that way, because the imbalance is there. So it's just not, women have been the property of men for so long. So that's why these little nuanced things that we say, I'm not saying what Jordan Peterson said in that clip was just the super evil, horrific thing. I'm saying number one, he missed a massive opportunity. Number two, he distracted from the point that she was trying to make, and then tried to drag the conversation back to more patriarchal hierarchy. And that's the problem, because those little things are what keep perpetuating this culture.
Yeah, so and I guess maybe that's my problem is sorry.
I'm curious. It's like a minute 30 clip that's on Twitter. I just linked it in chat as well. I mean, I don't understand when someone who's going to call in after we discussed it to say that they want to either defend Jordan Peterson or get clarification about something they haven't seen.
So that I didn't realize it was linked in chat, but since it was chosen not to show it, and it was chosen to have the audience kind of react,
you don't know how to Google.
The hosts were portraying
you couldn't have possibly Googled it to listen to it beforehand, to look around a little bit.
No, I specifically only called in to basically address the host portrayal of what was said, and that's why I wanted to start off by saying I'm not.
But what difference does the host portrayal matter if you don't have anything to compare it to? How could you possibly suggest that our portrayal was accurate or inaccurate if you didn't see the clip?
I guess that's kind of assuming that I'm attacking or defending Jordan himself. No. Calling.
It literally says on the call screener, wants to defend Jordan Peterson or get clarification on host stance. And you just said that you didn't view it because you were calling in to talk about our take on it. But if you don't have any other information, it's like if we had a take on the Gospel of Matthew and you called in to either defend the Gospel of Matthew or to get our further take on it without having read the Gospel of Matthew, what difference does it make? You can't possibly show that we're right or that we're wrong.
Well, I'm not asking if you're right or wrong about what Jordan said. I'm asking if the message and basically the issue that you took with what he said, I'm asking for clarification on that, or trying to maybe poke a couple holes in that. So
why are you trying to poke holes in something when you didn't watch the original clip and you clearly didn't understand our discussion about it?
Well, I guess for the same reason that a lot of times if somebody calls and tries to say, oh, so-and-so said, and you kind of say, well, I don't care who said it. This is about the logic behind it.
Are you dense? Are you dense? Because we specifically talked about what Jordan Peterson said. It is relevant to that what Jordan Peterson said is relevant to the discussion and our evaluation of it. If somebody calls in to tell me that so-and-so said, when I say I don't care what they said, it's because their say-so on an issue doesn't have any impact or in any relevance to my position on it. But what Jordan Peterson
Right.
said is 100% relevant to what we said about it.
But if I was disputing that he said it, or how he said it, or anything about him specifically, I guess I would agree.
So it doesn't matter whether you're. I didn't say you were trying to dispute that he said it. It's what
Right.
is your fucking point here? Is I guess the better question.
I feel like I made it. I thought I was having a decent conversation with Eve. I was about to kind of just say, all right, well, I guess I guess what I was about to say before.
Said, do you have a problem?
Yeah,
like, do you disagree with my clarification, or how do you?
No, not really. No, actually, what my follow-up was going to be was just that I think the problem was on my end, that because you said something that kind of made me realize this, is that I think I was thinking that, that's right. You said, it's not like we're saying what he said was the most evil thing ever, And I think that's one of the reasons I called in, is because I do have a problem with what he said for some of the reasons that you stated, but I felt like it was a more nuanced issue, not this big deal. And I thought you guys were saying it was this huge deal. And you're kind of telling me like, oh, no, we're not saying it's this massive deal. Like, it's a problem, though. And I agree, it is. So I guess we're kind of on the same page.
It is a huge deal, though, still, because we're talking about rape and women being viewed as property value. So to me, while yes, it comes across like he didn't say anything that crazy, when he's saying things that are negating from really valid points that are actually going to help us eliminate that issue, then it does turn into a big deal. So while sure, he says this, to me, the fact that it wasn't that big of a deal actually adds to it being problematic, because he was able to say this little like subtle, like, I wonder, who knows, but it is a big deal. So that's why we're talking about it, because sure, while what he said technically on paper isn't this big, horrible, awful idea, he's not saying I think women should get raped or something like that. He is perpetuating a rhetoric and then not allowing for more helpful rhetoric about something that is a big deal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think to the extent the aspects of this that you're saying are a big deal, I think I do agree are a big deal. I don't feel like I'm still disagreeing with you on that.
Okay.
All righty. Well, man, it was super great to talk to you guys.
And yet, I went into, I specifically said during the discussion about this that it wasn't necessarily clear, and even asked Eve about this notion of perhaps he's saying this, or perhaps, did you hear that stuff?
Yeah, I did. And that's why I kind of prefaced my call-in reason with, get clarification. Because I kind of figured after I talked to you guys for a while, I might feel like, oh, we're more in agreement than I thought.
Okay.
Good. I'm glad that we are on this issue. It's important to me that people be on this side of that issue.
All righty. Well, have a great night, you guys.
Thanks, David. You too.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, when I see someone, call screener put in that he wants to defend Jordan Peterson, the first thing he says, I didn't watch the clip. And I'm like,
that's the problem. I think a lot of people just want to defend Jordan Peterson automatically. So they're already going to go ahead and side with him without even hearing the clip.
Yep. I might have to do this one real quick. We have Craig from Malibu. Craig, are you the one I spoke to on?
Yes, I am. How are you, Mr. Dillahunty?
It says here, the call screener says, Matt said to call and wants to talk about abstract objects, but that's not what I wanted to talk about.
No. He tried to squish it in. I noticed that you were talking about abstract objects with the guy before, and I was like, I thought we were going to call to talk about the Jimmy thing, and then I said, but I also would be interested in talking about abstract objects. Can you squish that in?
Okay.
But I guess that's how he did it. Can I just say before we start
Sure.
I think that what Peterson said was actually pretty problematic. He does that a lot. I like a lot of what Jordan Peterson is about, and then I think he undercuts it with this sort of let me be kind of an alt-right sort of controversial take that doesn't help. I didn't hear your conversation, but that's how I see the Jordan Peterson thing. So I thought you guys would agree with that. I don't know. But anyway,
It's I have a storied relationship with Jordan Peterson, and don't find him particularly impressive or comprehensible most of the time. And so that's why even after watching the clip, one thing to remember is that this is an edited clip from something else. And as someone who's had my words edited, I want to make sure that this is why we didn't play the clip. We figured somebody would copyright strike it, and or there may be more to it. The bigger issue here was the notion, whether it's happening or not, it's definitely happening. Whether or not Jordan Peterson thinks it should be happening, that the value of women should be contingent or amplified by how irritated the men in their life are by wrong done to them, was that objection. But continue.
Right. My only point is, like, whenever I see Jordan Peterson controversy like trending on Twitter, I wince because I'm like, oh no, because I like his comparative religion stuff. But I don't think the controversial takes are helpful to the overall, to his take on comparative religion, which I think you probably think is relatively good. But that's not what I call.
No, I'm not aware of Jordan Peterson having a position that I think is relatively good on anything, nor do I think that he has any expertise at all in comparative religions. And I haven't really heard him give any sort of discussion about comparative religions. So maybe it's not fair for me to judge him on that. But let's get back to whatever we were talking about earlier.
Okay, sure. Should I start, or you want to start, or how you want to do this?
You start, and I will rudely interrupt.
Okay, and then hang up on me, and then it all goes down. It all goes south from there. I don't really have that much to say about it. I mean, there was a little controversy, okay, because I was talking to, I believe you know the guy, John Steingrad. Pretty sure you've streamed with him once or twice. Overall, he's a pretty nice guy. I get along with him pretty well. He used to be a Christian band leader, I think Hawk Nelson. And I was on a thread with him because he did some sort of really kind of gimmicky formulation of the problem of evil. And he had disappeared from Twitter for like a week or so, or 2 weeks or a month or something. And he came back, and he's been doing these kind of gimmicky takes that I think are beneath him. So I said to him, something along the lines of, I expect better from you. I used to think you were a guy with integrity like Joe Schmidt. Maybe it was a little too harsh.
So you were tone policing. You were tone policing someone, and instead of actually making an argument, decided to make it personal and suggest that you expected better of them. Why? Okay.
Well, no, not really, because
that's what you just said. You just said that you expected better from them. No. Listen, you said that you expected better from them, and that you probably went too hard.
No, I went too hard. Not him.
Yes.
Too hard.
So what the fuck did I say that was wrong just now that you're saying no to?
Because I wasn't tone policing. I was the formulation of the argument.
I'm sorry. That is in fact tone policing. In my usage of the term, saying I expected better to you is an ad hominem attack against the person, saying you are not performing in the way that I would like you to perform. How is it not tone policing?
Okay, fair enough. So the point, but the point I was making was that, and fine, okay, I was tone policing. The point I was making was he had a sort of, there's, as I'm sure you know, by the way, hi Eve, I watched some of your TikToks. I think you're,
hi.
I think you're fun on TikTok. I like what you do. And
thanks for watching.
I wanted to ask her a question, but
please, you can just finish your thing.
Oh, okay. As I'm sure you're aware of, Matt, there's more robust formulations of the problem of evil, which are at least credible and challenging to a theist, like the natural version. And John Steingrad, which I don't know if you know, but he's kind of in a group that I have respect for, like the Real Atheology crew, Apologia.
Do I know him and I'm not aware?
Maybe you probably. Yeah.
Anyway, it doesn't matter whether or not I know him. Continue.
He's kind of cool, okay, and like there are certain types of atheists that I like a lot and I respect because they help make the conversations between theists and atheists more elevated and intelligent. I would put Paul G. and Shannon in that category. I'd put Drew, the genetically modified skeptic. He's been on my channel twice. He's a nice kid, actually. objectively damned. And John Steingart was in that camp. So yeah, I was kind of tone policing him, and it was I was being a little bit too harsh. But
Sure.
he came back in the thread and said, and he reformulated his problem of evil to a more robust, challenging version, and we wound up having a good conversation, right? So I was talking with people on the thread about the problem of evil, which I think is a real conversation to be had between theists and atheists. And
I'm really getting bored with the backstory that's designed to soften the real problem that's coming up. So get to the problem.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. So some guy comes onto this thing and jumps on the thread and does some stupid meme to me, like either me filleting somebody or Jesus filleting somebody or something like that. And I said something along the lines of, "Ew, you disgusting freak." I think I retweeted it, which you pointed out I do all the time. I do that way too much. I retweeted and said something like, "You disgusting freak. You know, this is disgraceful, something, something, something." And then I muted him and moved on. Now, Jimmy showed up 5 or 6 or 7 hours later with some sort of dopey joke about Jesus coming in my face or Jesus come or something like that.
I think it was Jesus is a twink who likes cum in his tum-tum.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Oh, wait, so you saw, Eve, you saw this?
I saw the tweet.
Or you know the joke? How? So I said the same thing to Jimmy. I said something to Jimmy along the lines of, and I used Paula G and Shannon as an example. You know, I consider myself friends with Paula G and Shannon. I don't know if they consider themselves friends with me, but I do. They've both been on my channel. I have a good relationship with them as far as I'm concerned. Shannon's thing is to elevate the dialogue. I respect that. I'm totally on board with that. I honestly do try to do that. So I said to Joe, I was kind of shocked that he would say something that's stupid and childish apropos of nothing. Like, I wasn't talking to him. He didn't say it on his thread. He said it to me personally. So I said, you know, to him, I'm a little bit, frankly, shocked that you would tweet something that's stupid and childish. You know, I thought he was friends with Paul G and Shannon, and I'd be shocked if they did that. So I was kind of shocked.
Do you have friends that say things that you wouldn't say?
Yeah.
What's that?
Do you have friends that say things that you wouldn't say? Do you have friends that say things
I don't understand
you
the question.
wouldn't
What do you
say?
mean?
Do you have friends that say things that you would not say?
I guess. I mean, a lot of atheists say things that I would say, and I consider myself friends with a bunch of atheists on Twitter.
So why is it surprising? So why is it surprising that your atheist friends also have friends that say things that they might not say?
Okay. I didn't get it. I didn't get it because here,
hang on, Craig. I'd like for you. I'm going to do a summarize real quick here. I'd like for you to tell me what's wrong with my summary. You tone policed someone, and in response, somebody trolled you. You decided to quote tweet the troll by calling them names. Jimmy trolled you back, and then you decided to quote tweet that and tag 6, 7, 8, 9 different atheists that you're friends with about how you're reporting Jimmy to like the atheist authorities. Like you're tattling. So your tone policing went from tone policing to tattling. What's inaccurate there?
Well, I mean, I guess if you put it that way, but
that seems childish as well.
That's what somebody was saying that on the thread. Somebody was accusing me of being childish in this situation.
You were.
But okay, but wait a minute. Don't you think that? I mean, I'll make a video about this and I'll state my case. I guess I can see how the ingredient that's missing, okay, is that I wasn't tone policing Jimmy, generally speaking. Like, if he wants to tweet stupid jokes about whatever on his own timeline, not only would I not care, I wouldn't notice. He was on my timeline.
You decided to quote tweet him and tag a bunch of atheists that you're friends in a way of tattling. You're like, look at what Jimmy's saying. How can you be associated with this guy? Look at what Jimmy's saying. Is this really who you want representing this?
I wasn't saying it like that. No, wait.
You weren't.
Now,
I think you're lying as I read the tweet. As I read the tweets and I read what Shannon asked you. I read what Shannon asked you. Did you read what Shannon asked you?
You are misrepresenting. Okay, but you're misrepresenting the tone that I was aiming for, and I get it, this is a back and forth debate, but you are making it seem like I was being more babyish than I in fact was. Because in my defense,
I don't need to, I haven't done any of that. I haven't done any of that. I responded to the tweet, as did Shannon. Do you think that Shannon thought you were being childish?
I don't know. Shannon needs to elevate the dialogue person.
I'm just wondering, because did you read Shannon's reply to you?
Yeah, I interacted with it. I don't
You
remember
didn't think that,
no.
you didn't think that Shannon was basically saying you were being childish?
No, I thought Shannon was being really diplomatic and parsing the difference between me and Jimmy in an almost expertly diplomatic way. That's how I read that. But I can see somebody seeing differently. No, I thought Shannon's
reply to you. Shannon's reply to you, and then I'm going to put an end to this Twitter saga drama bullshit, was, did you just tag all of us because you didn't like Jimmy's joke? I mean, I know this is Twitter, but like, it's Jimmy. Jimmy makes jokes about sexy Jesus. She's clearly she's clearly suggesting that it's absurd for you to tweet at a bunch of atheists. Your tweet literally said, "Hey, other prominent atheists," and then tagged Paul, Answers in Genesis, Shannon, Trolley Dave, Vice Rhino, a bunch of others. Is Jimmy acting like a childish dick? And Shannon's response to you was, did you really just tag all of us to complain about Jimmy's joke? And you don't think that was her saying you might be the childish dick?
No, I think that was her.
Let me ask her.
I think that's a really good reformulation, skillfully done. But no, I don't. I think that was her parsing out the difference, trying to defend Jimmy without defending Jimmy, and being diplomatic at the same time in a way that
there's nothing to defend, though.
Okay, yes, there is, because I mean, I don't really think this is important, guys. I called up because Max said call up. You know, I'm not going to.
The reason I wanted you to call up wasn't even about the Twitter thing. I'd love to give you an opportunity to tell me from a theistic standpoint what you believe and why, since that's what the show's about. But I mean, if you're not ready to do that or you don't want to, that's fine too. But you had a question for Eve, and I want to be fair. Go ahead and ask Eve your question, and then we'll go ahead and ask Eve your question, and then we'll decide if we're going to talk about something else.
Okay, fair enough. Eve, you were a Pentecostal, is that correct? I think I heard I don't know where I heard your testimony. Maybe you were on Truth Wanted. Is that possible? Were you on Truth Wanted?
I was on Truth Wanted.
Some of your...
But I wasn't Pentecostal. I grew up non-denominational, charismatic.
Right, but wasn't it some sort of famous version, like Hillsong or something like that?
Toward the end of my faith, I was at Bethel, which is in Reading, and that's kind of one of those bigger mega church type place. Yeah. That was the last 6 months of 25 years of faith. I was there.
Wow. And so your experience with them was negative, I take it? I don't remember this. I'm going back, I think, a year, so I don't really remember the specifics. Was your experience with them negative?
It was, there was some negative parts of it for sure. There was some good stuff. What's your main, like, what are you wanting to get to?
No, I was just trying to clarify, because that seems, I don't really know that much about Bethel, but I think it's a denomination, like you called it, non-denominational, charismatic. I think it's very similar to the type of Christian I am. So I was a little bit surprised. I was like, well, haven't you had experiences that you thought were legitimately with the Holy Spirit? I mean, I'm sure you did then, but what do you think of the experiences now? So how do you parse that out? Is I guess my question, because, okay, I'll preface
my personal experiences. How do I reconcile those now that I don't have faith?
Well, yeah. Can I say something before you answer, or no?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Because, for example, my sister has come to my church here in California, and she has literally been in a service that has brought tears to her eyes. She is not a Christian, and I'm not sure she will become a Christian, and I always wonder how she parses that out. Like, so that would be my question. How do you parse that out? Do You tell me. I'm not going to put words in.
Pretty.
I'm curious.
I was just at a concert that brought tears to my eyes, and I can tell you, it wasn't Christian. I watched a show the other day that brought tears to my eyes. I have moments with friends where I feel intense joy and happiness and unconditional love, just like I was experiencing in moments of worship that was more conjured up. Now I'm experiencing it more organically. But those worship services, which I was a part of, I was a worship leader, I was behind the scenes with all of that, are designed to make you have those feelings. I mean, the rooms are designed to give you those emotions and those sensations, down to lowering the thermostat at times. And not all places do this, of course, but you can create those environments pretty easily, and you can experience them anywhere. When I go to a quote secular show, I don't. Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. Well, why?
Hang on.
What?
Hang on, Craig, because first of all, he was still talking, but what she's basically saying is the same thing that I've said before.
I like what she's saying.
What she's saying is similar to the things that I said before, which is, while I was in church, would have said, yes, I felt the Holy Spirit. And now when I look back on those things, I was wrong, because we have plenty of evidence that those things are psychologically explained, and no evidence for the supernatural causation hypothesis at all. It's not testable. It's not falsifiable. There's no way to verify it. It's just a whole bunch of people standing around saying, oh, do you feel that? Yes, I feel that. Must be the Holy Spirit, because that's what I think it is. When there's no demonstration.
Right. I totally understand that. The reason why I was curious in Eve's case, and not necessarily yours, is there are differences in denominations. And yours was, I think, Southern Baptist, which isn't very spirit influenced, spirit oriented. I'm not even sure that they believe in that type of stuff. I don't know.
You don't know, but you're free to tell me what my thing was and what it was all about.
No,
that's cool.
It was an educated guess. That's what I thought I heard. You can clarify if you want.
I tell you what,
am I wrong?
I'm pretty sure you making educated guesses about me is not a way for calls to go good on this show. But by all means, continue. Is that all you had to ask?
I've listened to your testimony a few times. What struck me about Eve that is very different is that her experiential, and I didn't hear this from her telling of the experience, I pieced it together from the type of Christian she was, that I'm like, well, wow, she must have had experiences that are very similar to mine. And I totally understand that they could.
Those made it easier for me to leave and to stop believing, because once I realized that the only reason I assigned those experiences to a God is because I had been indoctrinated to do so, because I wasn't willing to just say I don't know, or it's unexplained. In most cases, it was very explainable. I had been manipulated or indoctrinated into it. It was very easy to walk away once I saw that I had been emotionally manipulated. Theology is one thing to have to deconstruct from your brain and figure out, but these experiences, those felt like dominoes, because those were just emotional things that we can, like Matt was saying, easily look at neuroscience, and it explains them to us, because we see this across the board. We see it in Kundalini yoga. We see it in other religions and other denominations. We see it outside of religion altogether. We see it with drugs. So that's not, that was a really easy thing for me to walk away from.
Right, I totally understand the logic of what you're saying, but what I've been offering in terms of working on a cogent apologetic about religious experiences, which is hard to do because you're trying to. Only I have epistemic access to my inner life, so it's really hard to build an argument for a third party based off of experiences that are 100% real and deep and really powerful to me.
How do you know they're real? If you could prove they're real, then they would be valuable.
Real to me. I believe in them. I believe in the authenticity.
No. So Craig,
100%.
Craig, you have experiences, but that doesn't mean that your understanding or interpretation of those experiences are correct. Nothing is true merely for you. Truth is about facts in the universe. It may be true that you experienced X, but that doesn't mean that your explanation for X is true.
Right, I understand that. I'm not negating that.
As soon as
soon
as you suggested true for you, and that you have some internal epistemic warrant that doesn't apply.
Okay.
So
no, true for me.
Then let's do it this way, Craig. What experience do you think you've had that you attribute to the Holy Spirit?
Well, okay, that's not how I wanted to explain it. So that's, trying to lead me in a different direction than the most convincing possible interpretation that I can put forth for somebody else.
Yes, imagine that. I'm trying to stop wasting time and actually get to something productive. Do you have an example of something that you attribute to the Holy Spirit? That's literally the only thing I asked. And instead of answering it, you decided to dodge and object to the question. Do you,
No,
Craig,
I didn't.
have something? I misheard you.
Or misinterpreted what I was doing. I was trying to.
Did you not just say that this isn't the way that you wanted to go? And never mind. Go ahead. Whatever. I don't care.
What I was trying to say, okay, was that this is why I was curious about Eve in particular, okay, because she has shared a denomination.
I no longer give a fuck why you were interested in Eve. Either answer my question, come up with your way to dodge it, or move on to the next thing.
Okay, so the thing that I was trying to say is that I have the experiences that I experienced that I consider powerful religious experiences are 100% real to me and my wife and a lot of Christians I know.
No, sir. Stop for a minute. When you say they're 100% real to you and to your wife, no experience that you had is real to your wife. You guys don't share a mind. You don't share an internal epistemic warrant. I'm still talking, Craig. You don't share a mind. You don't share internal epistemic warrant. I just asked you to give an example of an experience you've had that you attribute to the Holy Spirit. And instead of doing that, you talk about how you have experiences that you attribute to the Holy Spirit and how they're true for you and for your wife, but not an example of one. Why is that?
Wait, okay, I can give you 1,000 examples, Matt. I have them every single day of my life.
I just asked for one. Please stop. Steve, please stop dancing. Now I've asked you why you wouldn't. Are you going to give me one or not?
Every single day, I put on the worship music that I listen to, and every single day, bar none, no exceptions, I feel what 100% seems to me to be the peace of God which passeth understanding and the power of the Holy Spirit. It happens to me every single day of my life. And it's as real to me epistemically. Now you can say that I'm wrong, but epistemically, it is as real to me as steam in the shower.
Stop. Listen.
Stop what?
Every day you listen to worship music and you feel what you identify as the peace. My question was, now that you've answered an example of something that you attribute to the Holy Spirit, how do you know that you are correctly attributing that to the Holy Spirit? What is your methodology that confirms that this peace that you feel is coming from the Holy Spirit?
Because it 100% to me seems to be obviously the case. Now, I can give you examples that I've given in my video.
Stop.
What?
It's 100% obvious to me that you're full of shit. And therefore, I'm epistemically justified in saying that that's the case, right?
I mean, I'm really obviously not full of shit. I'm telling you God's honest truth. You don't have to believe me. The
fact that you are 100%. I asked you, Craig, what methodology you use to confirm the source of that peace. And your answer was that it 100% feels that way to you. That is circular reasoning. It is tautology. It is a fallacious thing. You have not provided a methodology for which to justify your position.
Okay. An epistemic experience can be so vivid and real that to deny its reality to the person experiencing it would be absurd. If I say I'm swimming in a pool and you literally ask me, how do you know you're swimming in a pool? I say, it would be incoherent. I'm either insane.
No,
or
sir,
if
that's
it's real
patently
to me.
absurd. If you're swimming in a pool
No,
and
it
I
is not.
ask you, there is a mountain of physical evidence to prove that you're swimming in a pool. Why is it that when you want to seem reasonable, you go to an example that is absolutely undeniably true and grounded in physical facts about reality instead of
Okay, I
the
could literally,
fictional internal scenario that you went with for your Holy Spirit?
Craig, when I listen to Beyonce, I feel peace that passes all understanding. And I swear Beyonce is God. And that is so obviously truthful to me. So there. Like that's how you sound right
but
now.
okay. When people have like a musical experience, okay, that's in essence a spiritual experience. It's just a low resolution spiritual experience. When we're talking about our faculties in action, if I say, I see that thing over there, and it's really dim and far away, it's really easy for somebody who hasn't had a powerful and vivid sensory experience to say, maybe, hard to say, it's really far away. If you see something up close and your senses evidence the case to you, you are 100% rationally justified in believing that which I clearly perceive. 100% rational. Doesn't
No,
mean I'm
sir,
right.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't mean
I don't know. You would need to
define.
define, first of all, low resolution spiritual experience. And it needs to be, there's been zero demonstration that any such spiritual experience exists, that it is spiritual.
Nonetheless, is low or high res. Yeah. How are you?
Yeah. People experience things. You don't get people experience. I'm still talking. People experience things. People experience things and they may call it spiritual, but the issue is how do you demonstrate that it is in fact spiritual? Because I'm not aware of any way nothing spiritual has ever been demonstrated to be testable or falsifiable. So there's no methodology for demonstrating that something is spiritual or supernatural.
Right, but you're asking me two separate things. You're asking me how I justify to myself, which is, again, I am completely rationally justified in believing that which I clearly perceive. If I
No, you're not.
In my apartment,
no,
yes,
you're not.
That is the essence.
What about
no, you're not.
That they are Jesus.
Okay, now I'm muting you. Does the person who believes sincerely that they are Abraham Lincoln, are they 100% rationally justified in that experiential belief?
That they are what? I missed the...
That they are Abraham fucking Lincoln.
No, but that person's senses aren't functioning properly. If I put you...
Craig,
how do you know yours
Craig,
are?
now I'm muting you again. Your position was that someone is 100% rationally justified in believing anything that they've experienced. And my point was, people experience things that aren't true. Optical illusions, hallucinations, delusions. You need to demonstrate. You were pointing out that they have their faculties. You don't know whether they have their faculties. You need to demonstrate how you determined that the conclusion you reached and the thing you experienced isn't an interpretation that is inaccurate about a delusion. How do you do that?
Okay, can I talk? Okay.
God damn it, Craig. Okay, no, you can't. I'm going to mute you again. Here's how this works. Because there's a delay, sometimes it gets very frustrating. And so I put someone on mute like you. And then I ask them a question and I unmute them. And when I unmute them, it's when I ask the question that ends in the question mark that in normal conversation would indicate that it is now your turn to speak. When you respond with, "Can I talk now?" that means you're either being snotty or you don't understand the basics of communication. So I'm going to ask the question and then it will be your turn to talk. And that is, how do you demonstrate that what you experienced isn't delusion and that the conclusion that you reached about its cause is warranted? You are now free to speak.
Okay. Demonstrate to you is different than evidence to myself. I am completely rationally, if my senses operate correctly, my senses evidence the world to me as it actually occurs. If you, Beth Andrews, and Pine Creek Doug, the three most skepticy skeptics in town, were in my room, and I said, "Do you see that?" We'd all go, "Yes." "Do you hear that car alarm?" We'd all go, "Yes." our senses all function more or less the same. So if I'm experiencing something that's 100% vivid and real to me, I'm 100% rationally justified in believing in the reality I perceive. I'm not crazy.
No, sir, you're not, and you just disproved your own thing. I'm going to mute. No, you're not, and I'm going to explain how you just debunked yourself. If you were in a room with me and Seth, Pine Creek won't be there. If you were in a room with me and Seth, and you said, "Do you see that?" and we said yes, that is external verification that your senses are probably reliable. But if you said, "Do you see that?" and we said no, then clearly either you are able to see something that we aren't, or you are seeing something, or you are not seeing something, you are engaged in delusion. You are not warranted to believe what you see, irrespective of input external to that, which is what you're claiming, which is why the person who thinks they're Abraham Lincoln isn't warranted. If they think they're speaking to Abraham Lincoln, they're not warranted.
You missed the point. You missed the point.
I missed the point. I'm going to bet you $100 that I did not miss the point. You want to take that bet?
Okay, sure. Okay, you missed the point. When I say that I first of all, you froze concrete dug out. That's hilarious, but I don't know why. So me, who's in the room? Steph Andrews, you, myself, and God help us, Aron Ra. Okay, I say, do you see that? And you say yes. That demonstrates to all three of our senses the reality of that car out there. I say, do you hear that?
No, it doesn't.
And all I'm trying to, wait, you're not letting me finish. All I'm trying to tell you is that our senses would function identical to each other. So when I tell you that I have a sensory experience, that just if we'd all hear the car alarm and we'd all see the cat.
No, I'm saying that is external. Okay, I'm going to mute you. Listen. When you say, do you see that? If we say yes, and we clarify that we're all talking about the same thing, that is external confirmation that your senses are likely reliable. There is the possibility that we are all mistaken in what we see, or that we see something that is independent of each other, and yet we are verifying. But if you look out the window and you say, are you seeing that? And we say no, that isn't confirmation that your senses are wrong. Maybe my senses are wrong. The point is, which I did not miss at all, you need to have some way to verify that your senses are reliable. And the mere fact that you see something, even if other people agree with you, doesn't mean that you're right. It's a strong indicator that you're likely to be right, but it doesn't mean that you're right. And when, for example, you get a bunch of people together in an environment, and now we're not even, they're singing in church or listening to their worship music, and you say, do you feel that? And they say yes. There's no demonstration that they're even feeling the same thing, but to whatever extent they're feeling the same thing, it could be, and all the evidence points to it being a psychological experience and not an experience brought about by supernatural causation.
And none of it points to a God.
My question to you was, how do you demonstrate, A, that your senses are reliable and you're not delusional in what you experienced, and B, that your inference about the cause is warranted? And your answer was, I'm 100% justified because I experienced it. And that's not how epistemology works. So how can you demonstrate that what you're experiencing is caused by the Holy Spirit?
Okay. Unless we have reason to doubt, we presuppose the reliability of our senses. All empirical investigations are predicated on sense data and the reliability of the senses. It's not something I have to evidence to myself. It is a presupposition that tells me what is
I'm
out
sorry,
there in
but
the
you're
world.
wrong. I'm sorry, but you're wrong, and I'm going to stop you to explain this again. I'm going to stop you to explain this again. Yes, we as humans generally rely on our senses, but we know that our senses are not reliable. We know that there are deceptions and delusions. You do not, as a foundation of epistemology, get to, by default, assume that your senses are reliable when they are indicating to you something that isn't indicated to other people, because we do know that senses are unreliable.
It's
So
just
you have
up to
to
Matt. If you had a headache, you get to decide that you have a.
hang on, because I unmuted you to let you talk, and you were talking during that, and then said that's not true and went to a headache. Listen to me very carefully, Craig. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to unmute you. Is there anyone on the planet whose senses are always 100% reliable and unable to be deceived or deluded?
No, but
Cool.
can I answer fully?
Hang on.
Hey, no, but.
Hang on.
But,
Hang on.
look, can I ask you a question too?
Hang
You keep
on.
muting me and
Hang on.
dude.
I know this is fucking difficult for you, Craig, but you're the one that fucked this up instead of me having to lead you around by a leash to get you to acknowledge something simple, which is that nobody's senses are perfectly reliable, and therefore nobody gets to assume they're perfectly reliable, which is why we seek independent confirmation. It's why your example had me and Seth and Pine Creek in the room to help verify this. And so in a world, the reality that you and I share, where senses aren't always reliable and where people can experience delusions, what is your method for distinguishing between a delusional experience identified as the Holy Spirit and a real one dedicated or identified as the Holy Spirit? That's the point. You are free.
All I was trying to do by putting Seth Andrews and you and me in a room together was to say that our sensory experiences line up with each other so that we presuppose, I didn't say our senses are perfectly reliable. I say we presuppose the reliability of our senses. That is how we evidence the world.
You're not even listening.
And
You didn't answer any of his questions, and they were good questions.
Yeah, this is it. I've been doing this for 18 years. I asked very specific questions to get you there. Everybody knows that you did not answer the question.
You are misleading me.
I'm misleading you. I asked a question.
Yes,
How can a question mislead you?
Because I'm trying to build a case, and you're taking me in a different direction than the strongest
You're
version
trying
of
to build
the
a case
case.
based on assertions. You're trying to build a case based on assertions which are demonstrably false, and I'm debunking them. That's how debate works. I'm sorry that you have an irrational position and will not actually answer the question that I've asked. But if you don't answer the questions that I've asked, we're going to move on. What is the methodology? What methodology do you have?
It'll help.
Yeah, what methodology do you have to distinguish between a real experience with the Holy Spirit and a delusional experience with the Holy Spirit?
My senses function properly. Ergo,
goodbye, sir. I have no more interest. I have no more interest in conversation with you because I asked you if there was anybody on the planet whose senses were not subject to delusion, and your response to this was to say that your senses function properly. You, sir, are delusional and dishonest in conversation, and I refuse to waste any more of my audience's time on that at all. It's disrespectful to them and the guest. You have a chance to say your last goodbye here.
Okay, we can cut it off. Can I come back?
Nope.
Can I try to ask the question?
He's gone, but you can say whatever you want.
No, I was just going to say, can have him explain to me how I can tell if when I listen to Beyonce, I'm sensing God or if it's just a neurological reaction to the music. Tell me how I would know.
Yeah. If I have to spend that much time to get you to admit that senses can be fooled, and then when I push back, your response is, my senses are reliable. You just wasted everybody's time because you're not interested in truth. You're not interested in honestly defending your position. You want to tell a story. And the story that you want to tell is one that even I've heard a million times before, which is how you get up every day and feel the Holy Spirit and feel it in your life. And you go out and you work with people and you're baffled by Eve. How could she have had these same experiences? Yeah, Matt was a Southern Baptist and that's not spiritual enough because you have the right religion. You were actually condescending and childish at almost every point where you had to do anything, just like you were on Twitter. And you're baffled by Eve, not because it's because you see, how could she possibly leave like the true version that I have? And it's
Pretty
because
easily.
she actually listened and applied skepticism. It's because she realized, well, I'm not putting words in her mouth, I am preaching. She realized the very thing that we were trying to get you to answer. How do you tell the difference between a real experience with God and a fake experience with God? Because while you are convinced that your senses are 100% reliable, you also are convinced that nobody's senses are 100% reliable. And the truth is, there are millions of believers out there who all believe that they've had experiences with God, and they don't believe they've had experiences with the same God that you have, which is why there's 1,000 denominations that all identify as some variety of Christian. And then you have Muslims, Hindus, and everybody else who can have some sort of experience, and they all think they're right. And all we're saying is, I'm happy for you to be right if you can demonstrate that you're right. How absolutely sad it is.
And that's what it came down for me. Down to for me is that I couldn't demonstrate that to myself. How I knew that it was a God.
That's the only reason I brought it in, was to say that.
I don't even know what this is, but Jimmy brought me yum yum for my tum tum. So I have no clue, and it's going to get cold, and I don't know why we keep getting food before the show's over. We have a bunch of calls, and I want to make sure we get to something beyond that. So let's try and do these a little smoother, and maybe I'll back out a little bit. Andy in California, pronouns he, him, is a theist who's a former atheist and thinks he has a definition of God that's accurate. So welcome, Andy. Why don't you go ahead and give Eve your definition?
Hey, wow. I can't believe I'm on. So I don't know if I have one that works for me. And as a former atheist, I think different people will see me still as an atheist. I'll talk to some Christians. They'll still put me in that category.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that existence, the way I have come to understand it, does deserve that label. And it is for both of you guys. I just thought this would be an interesting conversation.
Andy is saying that existence deserves the label God.
So existing is God? That's what you're saying?
No, existence.
Like just existence, existence in general. Like
why?
To say like
why?
Well, okay.
The traditional definitions of God are that it is an intelligent agent. Do you think existence is an intelligent agent?
I think that the fact that we're intelligent and we are like a part of it, then I think, yes, it does act intelligibly. Yes.
Andy, am I existence?
Mm-hmm. You are, yeah.
I am existence.
Or you're a part of it. Like you are existing.
I'm a part of it, but I am not existence, right?
Maybe if we're making that division of existence as all of existence,
is this business
just
card,
part of it,
Andy, is this business card part of existence? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I suppose
I'm part of existence, and this business card is part of existence. Does this business card, is it a thinking agent?
No, it isn't thinking.
Cool.
No, I suppose not.
So parts of existence are thinking agents, and parts of existence are not. I am a person.
Yes, I suppose.
My fingernails, are they made of the same stuff as my skin?
I think maybe on some level it is, but on some other level,
I think you need to go take a biology course, but I'll just stop.
Okay.
I'm sure Eve has.
I mean,
questions.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I want to know what is the value in, like, what is it that makes it God? I still don't feel like you've defined what God is. It seems like you're just replacing the word existence for God, and I'm curious as to why. What's the point?
I think the point is just to have, because I think like in the conversation, like we're always talking past each other because we don't define God. And I think that's really what I was intending with the call, and the way I tried to frame it to the call guy, the guy who talked to me before here.
So you're saying we should
so
all
that's
use
really
the
what I was trying
definition
to
of
get
God
to.
that you're presenting here, which is existence.
I'm proposing it. I'm supposing it to you guys.
Why?
And then I wanted
Why
to
would that
see.
be valuable? I don't think theists or atheists are gonna. Most of them are gonna agree with you on that definition. It really feels like you're just replacing the word. You're just changing the definition of the word existence and saying God so that we have something to argue about.
Okay. Well, not argue about. Hopefully, to come to like concord about, like to come to like an accord about.
So you just want
like,
atheists to say like there's a God because existence is a thing.
Yeah, like I was just trying to say, like,
do you think that
we
Christians?
are, like, for example,
do you think that Christians are going to give up their personal God and adopt your new existence definition?
I think that if it's like, and I'll go to like Jesus talking to the Jews.
That's like a yes or no question, but I'll get a lecture anyway.
I think. No, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to do that. I was saying like just that image when he did convince the Jews, or at least some people. So I think that's how it would work. Like if you were to have like a higher truth about it, then some people would come to it.
Well, what is a higher truth?
Some people wouldn't.
And how is it a higher truth to redefine existence as God? And how is that going to? I was a Christian.
What's the value in that?
For a massively long time, and Jesus loved me. That was a personal relationship with the thinking, feeling, all-knowing, all-wise creator of the universe. There is not a chance in fucking hell that I would ever say, you know what? I'm going to denounce my savior and just say that God is existence.
Right. Well, I think, like, I'm just trying to, like, I think that if God is real, then there should be some way to talk to non-believers where they will resonate with it. So I'm not saying God, that's just the highest
you shouldn't have to get us to resonate with something. You should either have evidence of a God or not. We shouldn't resonate with like a story or a narrative that you give us. Either you should have evidence of this God claim, which Christians have a very different God claim than what you're proposing. So
exactly,
we're not going to find common ground there.
Andy, you literally just said, I think if God is real, there should be a way to. What makes you think that God is real? Where's the demonstration that God is real? Your position is if God's real, we should have some way to discuss it. Cool. Now demonstrate that there is a God that's real.
Okay,
you're putting the horse before the cart.
Sure. I mean, it is really hard to get to this. Like, how do you cross that like bridge? And
not my fucking problem. I'm not the one that's believing that there's a God.
Sure.
If you're sitting here saying you're convinced there's a God, don't complain to me about how hard it is to prove it. I'm not the one that's believing something that's hard to prove.
Right. I'm not complaining to you. I'm sorry. Like, I was just, so maybe one way that I could put it, you can disagree with this. I'll just put it out there and then we'll leave it at that. I don't want to waste your time here. I think that if we are like sentient beings that came out of existence, then the whole of it, because it is greater than us, should have qualities that are to us or better. And that's why I would say that then God, you could call just existence God, because it's like almost like a person in that sense, if it has people.
What makes the universe greater? The whole of the what makes the whole of existence greater than us? Greater in what way?
Just the fact that it produced us.
Why does that make something greater?
It produced us, like it.
So because chemistry works, because chemistry and physics works, you think that makes it greater than us? Greater what way?
I mean, just the fact that it brought us into existence. Like
no. Like you don't get to give. You don't get to give it motivation. Did the universe intend to bring us into existence? Did the universe take any conscious action to bring us into existence?
I guess I don't know.
Sure. So then, how can you credit it? You know, if my cat brings poop into existence,
Sure.
Does that mean the cat did that knowingly, intentionally?
I mean, in a sense, I think you could say it did.
No, it didn't. It's
in
an
a way you could-
involuntary part of biology. It didn't knowingly do any of that. You put food in, the system processes it, poop comes out. No agent-like thought required. You might decide
Right.
when
think,
you're
like,
going to
maybe,
release
like-
your bowels, and if you're lucky.
Sure. Yeah, like, well, I understand, like we were saying, maybe I'll go back to the drawing board on this.
Okay.
But I think, like, you know, we have cells, and our cells have, like, behaviors that are sort of, like, we can, like, study it and be like, wow, like, that has, like, a certain, like, it seems intelligent, even though, like, it's reduced to a really basic thing.
Dude, I like hitting the
avert,
bong
like,
as much as
uncomfortable-
anybody,
okay.
but I don't do it when I'm reading science books.
Fair enough.
Come back
Okay.
when
Well,
you
that
have
was my
something,
thing.
but
Sure.
don't come back when you have something, but don't do it when you decided, hey, if there's a God, I want a way to describe it. Start with, if there's a God, I want a way to demonstrate it. And until you can demonstrate it, it doesn't matter whether or not you can talk about it or describe it or have connections to it.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
There's lots of potential great thoughts there to dig through, but this one might be quick. We'll see.
Okay.
Matthew in Las Vegas is a deist who wants to know if I can debunk his God. Matthew, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thanks, Matt. I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk to you. I've been watching your show over the last couple months and watching you debunk Christianity and Muslim stuff. And I just thought, how would you perform against my deist ideas on God?
Sure.
I have a Jewish background, but
I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna let you do it. Let's just get a couple things clear at the start. Whether or not I can debunk your God is irrelevant to whether or not your God's real. Whether or not your God can be debunked is irrelevant to whether or not your God's real. The inability of me or anyone else to debunk a God isn't evidence for that God. And many gods, in particular the deistic gods, are absolutely useless, unfalsifiable propositions. Having said all that, tell me what your God is and I'll see what I think and see what he thinks.
Well, I really enjoy how you're able to you speak about falsification. And I think the way to look at it is not in a scientific way, but a historical way.
Okay, I don't care. I don't care.
Okay.
If you don't have
so how about
this? History doesn't prove things, and it certainly doesn't prove a God.
Well, it shows us evidence of God, for instance.
No, it doesn't.
We live on
no,
a
it
planet
doesn't.
where there's...
No, it doesn't. History does not show us evidence of a God. Just like mathematics doesn't show us evidence of God. There's no variable God. The fact that people have historically believed in a God or credited a God is not evidence for a God. What does history show us that you think is evidence for a God?
Sure. I'll give you some examples. First off, we're on a planet where we can use things that are in the earth. Why are they there? They're just there by accident. Isn't it convenient that there happens to be uranium in the earth? Isn't it convenient that the dinosaurs
stop. No, stop. We know how and why chemical processes result in things. You don't get to say human beings have found a way to use the things around them and then add in that those things were likely put there for human beings. You do not get to assume intent. Just like when a bird builds a nest, isn't it convenient there was some straw and grass laying around and that the bird could use it? So therefore, the straw and the grass must have been put there so the bird can build a nest. That is an entirely fallacious line of reasoning. You are assuming the very thing you're trying to prove. That's not how a logical argument works.
But isn't that why a bird is a bird? Because they can use those things around them?
Goodbye.
That does explain that, and I agree. But
goodbye. When you present an argument and I point out what's wrong with it, if you then, and this is for everybody, if you then, instead of saying, I acknowledge that, I understand what's wrong with that, before you move on to something else, we're done. Because that tells me that you weren't paying attention. You're not arguing honestly. You're not willing to say, oh, well, of course, That was a logical fallacy. But what about this? Instead, you went to, isn't that what makes a bird a bird? I am completely unimpressed with your bong hit switch and the parade of bong hit switches that are coming of, well, gosh, if he's going to just use logic and stuff, I should just ask, isn't that what makes a bird a bird? What makes a bird is irrelevant to whether or not there's a God, and it's irrelevant to logical arguments. I'm sorry that people are just wasting your time tonight. Here we go.
Everyone's just smoking weed, I guess.
Yeah, I wish, never mind. Hi, May, welcome to the show. You're an atheist from Alabama, and I had a question, so dig in.
Hi, good evening, ma'am, Matt and Eve. First-time caller. I appreciate you taking the call. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Or is it Jamie again?
No, it's Jaime, but I go by Jamie.
Okay. I read it. I read it as it was typed, and I went with Jaime, and then I realized somebody else called recently and spelled it that way, but it was Jamie. So welcome, Jaime. My apologies. Continue.
Yeah, I am a ex-Hasidic Jew, and I appreciate the conversation about JP, Jordan Peterson, because my experience in such community was precisely how he describes the treatment of women and so on. So it's hard. It's funny to see how people would call in and try to contort themselves in a pretzel, try to explain away that he didn't mean it this way or the other. So that's just an aside. But more importantly, the reason I'm calling is I understand my bias having left the Hasidic Jewish community and feeling that my experience may have been, in a way, worse than others who have left their own radical or fundamentalist community. And I've tried to listen and understand those ex-Mormons and ex-Catholics and so ex-Muslims and so on. And there was one specific experience that myself and others who have left the Hasidic fundamentalist religion is where the similarities are where you're kind of dependent on the community for social and whatnot, and as well as the religious guilt that is instilled from birth. But in addition to that, being raised Hasidic, English is not even in the lexicon. Like, I feel like a foreigner in my own country when I first left the community 12 years ago, where you can't even start to even communicate yourself and navigate the new world that you're exploring, in addition to all the other stressors that come along with leaving fundamentalist religion. And I do understand that I have this take because that was my experience and I might be biased, but I was wondering if others can see it as well, and if it's not just my bias, if there is some objectivity to it. You still there, Matt?
Oh, hang on. Sorry, I was muted. I was asking if you could summarize. You mean your bias toward your religion that you came from, or I'm trying to follow you.
The bias that I acknowledge, that I feel that my experience could have been worse than others who have left their own fundamentalist religion.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard, there's horrific stories. Are you saying that you think that what you left was much worse because of what you personally experienced, or because of that branch of religion?
No, it's more so the lack of just speaking English. Like, we speak our own language. We speak Yiddish or Hebrew, and all of us that leave fundamentalist religion need to learn how to navigate the outside world and how to deal with religious guilt and other practices that are normal. But in addition to all that we have that is similar to other religions, the one that I left without even speaking the language.
Right. Oh,
Feeling
that
like a foreigner in my own
absolutely cripples
country.
you for sure. That makes it that much more difficult. And I think that would make it, that adds a whole nother level to your journey out of that, for sure.
Any thoughts, Matt?
I'm in agreement.
Well, it may not come off as now because it's been 12 years and I've done well for myself and overcame a lot of those hurdles. But it's just I contemplate trying to understand others' experiences while not trying to overshadow them with my own, but still understanding that the experience of myself and others who I know that have left the community may have been harder than the other fundamentalist, what I call cults and so on. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
you
appreciate
definitely had
time
different
and,
challenges.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's, my experience processing through this is going to be different from yours. We're all going to have our biases and our baggage, but I think the fact that you're asking the questions and trying to do it suggests to me that I don't even know. You're better off than you were, and I think the people around you are probably better for it as well. I mean, I'm not always, because I'm on a show and I'm taking calls. These are not the same conversations in exactly the same way. When people ask questions of me, like, like earlier in the show, it was, didn't you experience stuff that you attribute to the Holy Spirit? Yeah. And I could hang on to that bias, or I could challenge that bias. And I think that the people who are willing to challenge those biases, are better off for it. And yes, as sad as it is to potentially admit, in some way, including those who challenge their biases and then maintain them even though they're wrong, because the process of challenging them, if you get it wrong, you get it wrong. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that, these people are justified, but like our previous caller, who thinks his senses are reliable. Not only are his senses not reliable by his own admission, but by demonstration, his reasoning is flawed, is fallacious. The conclusions he reaches right here while we're talking are demonstrably flawed, and yet he doesn't recognize that, and then isn't going to challenge that bias, which is influencing his position about his other, like, oh, I know that my senses are reliable, and it's because I've put this to the test. And that, you have to challenge those biases. And I don't know if I have any other thoughts to add on that right now.
No, I appreciate your thoughts on it. And last thing I'll say that in the past when I've engaged in conversation with theists, it would lead nowhere. But at this point, having listened to you for quite a while, I personally don't find it fruitful, because to me it's checkmate. To me, the onus is on them, and there's no. I consider myself a hard atheist now, where unless you have, unless the onus is on you, unless you have something to prove, something hard to prove, there's no, for myself, I no longer engage in those, because speaking of bias, they don't see their own biases, and they, if ever, they have a way to come through where they can prove the existence of God. So to me, those are not fruitful, and thanks to you. So I appreciate you, Matt. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for calling. I'm trying to get this food moved out of my face. All right. We have one last call and then the super chats. And Alex in California wants to test an argument against the free will response of theists. So welcome, Alex. Let us know what it is you're talking about, that responding to, so we have a better understanding of it.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. So when you're arguing with a theist who believes in like an omnibenevolent God, and you ask them, well, if this God is all good, then why is there bad stuff in the world? They say, oh, well, that's just free will. That's humans doing something. I have an argument against that. So it's not a perfect syllogism, but I think it's a pretty good argument.
Is it cancer? Because it should be.
No, that's a good one.
I mean, cancer is an excessive. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I start by saying, like, do I have free will? And they'll say yes. And then I'll say, are there choices that I cannot make? Like, can I suddenly sprout wings and fly? They'll say, no, obviously you can't do that. So we've established that I have free will, and there are choices I can't make. Therefore, it would make sense to say that a God could create me in such a way where I have free will and I can't do bad choices. And yet this God didn't make me like that. So that would, the responsibility would be on him.
Yeah. Not only do I not think that that's going to have any sort of impact on anybody who believes this, I don't even find it to be a good response, because you're basically saying a God could make it so that I cannot choose to do bad things, but somehow still have free will. And their position is that the fact that you can't choose to flap your wings and fly to the moon, the fact that you can't choose to launch a thermonuclear weapon from your stomach directly at someone, the fact that there are limitations on those choices doesn't impact whether or not you have free will.
Right, that's not
and by the
free
way,
will.
I'm not convinced that you have free will, at least not in any, I definitely don't think you have free will in any libertarian sense at all. But the thing that they're saying is you have a choice and God allows you to act in certain ways, and that God is doing this specifically so that he can evaluate your character, because you can't punish someone for something they never did, even though that's part of it too. So to say God could have made me so that I have free will but can't do wrong is to misunderstand the free will they're talking about. It's about freedom to make decisions either in favor of God or not in favor of God. And if sin is doing things that are in opposition to God, and God prevents you from ever taking that action, then what free will do you have?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. I've been watching you for a while. I'm glad you've helped me strengthen my argument. So I'll definitely, rethink this.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you're far off. It's like, first of all, prove to me I have free will, and prove to me I have free will of the type that they're talking about that I could have done otherwise. That gets a little heady. But when we talk about the problem of evil, I don't use the problem of evil much because I find the responses to it are going to be more satisfactory than the objection itself. And so what we tend to see is like the problem of unnecessary evil, the problem of excessive evil. And so it's like, why did God have to make a world in which sexual intercourse that procreates, the procreation process that continues the species, is possible to be a violent, immoral act against another person, or possible that someone does it in a way that is wrong, that displeases God? There are plenty of creatures that reproduce asexually. Why weren't we created to reproduce asexually? And the answer would be, because God wanted you to have the freedom to choose to force someone to have sex, or to have sex with someone of the same gender, or whatever, So basically what they're saying is that God intentionally created us and intentionally gave choices that are our natural response to make, required us to make them, and then wants to punish us for not making the one that he likes. And then you can also respond to the problem of evil with things like cancer, and it's not free will that results in people in a desert area not having enough food to maintain a nutritious diet. It's not free will that causes babies to end up with terminal cancer. It's not free will that results in someone having a serious brain defect that prevents them from ever communicating with another human being and just spending their short life oblivious in a bassinet. Those things are not the result of individuals' free will. And a God could give people free will, but make it so that their free will doesn't impact other people. Like I could have the free will to take all kinds of horrible actions, but not actually kill people. But
yeah,
to take away
sense.
the option to do anything, to take away the option to do anything sinful is to basically negate free will at all. You have free will as long as you choose to always love me, and choose to always do what I say, and choose to always be good. And that's it. I mean, there's no choice between those two. If there's no choice, anyway, not to belabor the point.
All right. Yeah, Eve, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Matt. Those are the kind of arguments that I make all the time on TikTok, where you have to just have like a quick hot take. I mean, childhood cancer is a really great one. there's so many things. The free will argument, I agree with Matt. It's really boring. It's exhausting because you get the same stuff, and typically they relate it back to parenting somehow, which just reveals that they're shitty parents. but yeah, I think that I get what you were trying to, like, your point and your argument back, but I think you kind of overcomplicated it even. There's lots of short little easy things that are just like, bam, there's free will is not a thing. And that's where you can kind of get them. But the problem that I don't find that argument to be one that they will concede on usually, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, because I already, like, I definitely think that, cancer is a really good argument against it. I was trying to go for something that would maybe, like, get them to understand that that's not a good thing. But I guess that's just, I'm overcomplicating it a bit.
Maybe.
But thank you for
at least you're thinking about it.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's a great
Thanks,
conversation to be had.
All right. One last thing. Respect.
Yeah.
No.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Respectfully, F you, Jimmy, and no, you're done.
There you go. Perfect. Respectfully, F you, Jimmy. Fuck that respect. I actually need Jimmy, because I'm ready for the super chats, but I have this list and it seems to be that it's 177 pages of super chats. Or maybe it's just 177 super chats.
I was talking about video games. So at the top, click view queue.
I already did.
Well, these are your super chats. The bottom one's the oldest one.
That's all of them?
Right now it is. We get more when the super chat section begins.
Okay, because I had this page.
Yeah.
And then it said like 177 below it.
That's when you had the entire chat for the whole show on.
Oh, I had the queue. But anyway, okay, cool. There we go. 1999 from Greg Markowski. Thanks, Matt and Jimmy. Eve, now that you are out of religion, do you still enjoy music and performing? How has music and its meaning changed for you? There you go.
That's a great question. I don't enjoy it publicly anymore. I do it only for myself. I think, unfortunately, being in the Christian music world really ruined music for me as far as it being something I do with other people around. Because I was taught to use it as a tool of manipulation to coerce people into believing things that just weren't true, like we were talking about earlier. And that kind of sucked the fun out of it for me. So maybe I'll get back to it someday, but in general, it's more like therapy I do on my own at home. And then sometimes I post on Instagram, as you guys see.
You want to read this one? We'll alternate,
Sure.
I guess.
$10 from RPJ debunks Jordan Peterson is the epitome of education is not congruent with intelligence. The fact he has people who hang on his every word like he's infallible is mind-boggling.
I find that difficult to disagree with.
Agreed.
But I have to acknowledge that I find myself at odds with the world on a regular basis to the point where I have to question, unlike Craig, myself, my senses, my comprehension of the world, my understanding of rationality. And all I can do is keep, searching it and arguing for it, because there are people who will be like, oh man, what Jordan Peterson said about X, it was life-changing. And I have to keep going back saying there were people who walked out of the first Matrix movie with their minds completely blown. But those people, and I liked it. I liked the first Matrix movie just fine. My mind was not blown. The people who walked out of that movie with their mind blown were people who had no experience with philosophy and, hard solipsism and thought experience like New Evil Demon and Brain in a Vat and all those things. And so it doesn't surprise me that there are people that are impressed by what Peterson says. It surprises me that there are so many. But I also have to recognize I live in a world where it's like 50.1% It's less than 1% on any given thing. How is it the United States is so evenly divided 50-50 between political parties, between are we going to, value people's autonomy? And then because of the manipulation that takes place, the less than 50% portion somehow gets to dictate to everybody. It's really bizarre, but
yeah.
$20 from Dave Warnock, dying out loud. Here's some money from Matt and Eve so you can buy me a drink this weekend. Okay.
Will do.
I already bought you some other stuff for this weekend.
Same.
I bought you. No, I'm not going to tell you. I was going to make a joke about. I bought you a bathing suit and one of those hats where you can put alcohol drinks on both sides with multiple straws. But since I haven't actually done it yet, I guess it doesn't count.
Now you
so
have
yes,
to.
I will take this money. I will take this money and buy you drinks. Can't wait. Thanks, Dave.
Love you, Dave.
We love you, Dave. Get on the show. Come on, hang out with me after the beach party weekend's over.
$9.99 from Bryn Poo Casey. Using this to distract myself from Craig. Thanks, Craig, for getting us that super chat.
Craig got us more money. That's good. We have $20 from the Grumpy Gardener, Fungal Bungle Manungle Bungle, which, see, I would naturally assume that is related to Fergal Burgle Manurgle Burgle, but it could be a coincidence. By the way, if Aron or Jimmy wants to get me the announce list for today, I will be happy to read that off shortly. Here's another one for you to read.
$10 from Larry Fishman. Eve, I don't know enough about you other than that you're clearly a human being with your own well-developed thoughts and feelings. You're also absurdly beautiful, although that is a distant second. Thank you.
A distant second. I'll just let that rest. $20 from Omega. Ever notice how people who claim to not follow or care about politics will still have strong political views? People who hate to talk about politics will randomly spew their views, then gaslight you to stifle any response. Yeah, but I think it's different. I think the people, like I used to be largely non-political. I still had views on stuff, but one of my views on politics when I was young, late teens, early 20, was that it didn't matter, that it was some sort of power game that people were playing and that there was no way to really impact it, that your vote didn't matter and stuff. So I would be like, oh, I hate politics, but didn't change the fact that I had political positions, because the truth is politics deals with the things that we need to deal with to maintain a life in a community.
Right. It's a reflection of opinions and beliefs that you're going to have regardless of whether those politics exist or not. So,
yeah. There we go. Oh, this is
$20. $20 from Jeff Meager. Matt and Eve, great job tonight. Arden and Jimmy, best producers ever. Also, Jimmy, your takedown on Cus I Wanna was epic.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Arden and Jimmy.
Yay. And a huge thank you to call screeners and mods and everybody else who's helping out here. $10 from Jim Barrows. DNA makes a bird a bird. Bird is the word. Fergal burgle. Yes. That's the thing that makes a bird a bird. Actually, I would argue the thing that makes a bird is our declaration that X is a bird. And then by defining the set theory definition of it, those things that fit within a bird, so it is the characteristics of something that fit the set that we defined. That's what makes a bird, as long as the set is bird. But, bird is the word.
$9.99 from George Carlin would have hated Andrew Tate. Let's all just smile that Metroid Prime Remastered is here, and it's just as wonderful as the GameCube days. Samus being a woman was the best creative decision ever made, and it shows with Prime. I know about none of this, so...
I know a little bit. I was not a Metroid Prime player, but it's a big deal in video gaming history that a little teeny clump of animated pixels that is virtually unrecognizable. Spoiler alert, was definitely unrecognizable with regard to its gender, and then there was the reveal at the end of the game with taking off the helmet, and it's like, yes, it was great.
Nice.
$9.99 from Jimmy Snow. If we don't get enough super chats, we have to sell the show to Craig. I will start giving super chats before we get around to selling the show to Craig. I don't think Craig wants to buy it.
1069 from Kathleen Moncrief. I'm just happy to have all of you delightful sinners keeping me company during some Wednesday night PowerPoint making.
That's true too. I don't mean to what Kathleen said was true. I'm saying that it is delightful to have people keeping you company while doing things. And just for clarity, I don't have the list yet of who's coming up. So let me tell you a little bit about The Line. The Line is the network that you're watching right here, right now. And it's run by Jimmy. I lied to Craig and told him that I was Jimmy's boss. When, if anything, Jimmy might probably be viewed as my boss. I'm kind of independent. Well, it doesn't matter whose boss is whose. But when Craig had beef with Jimmy, I was like, oh, why didn't you tag me? I'm Jimmy's boss. Because it's kind of an inside joke, because people are constantly trying to, well, when is The Line going to fire Jimmy? And I'm like, never. I mean,
yeah.
Forrest might wind up, killing him by doing 6 and 7 hour shows. That could happen. But yeah, it's a lot more than that, though. And so what's happening right now, there's not a camera so that I can show you. But hopefully, as we get better at this show isn't being produced from Jimmy's place right now. It's being produced from right down the hall. Arden is back there running the production right now. Jimmy's over here hanging out as well, and double checking everything. But there's also people who screen the calls and people who are actively moderating in chat. And as I can be a lot for some people to handle, we get a lot of people in chat who, rather than calling in and trying to engage in a conversation because they don't want to be put under fire, they don't want to say, okay, what do you believe and why? Give me an example of what you believe and then show me how you concluded that this is the right answer. It's predictable. For 18 years, I've been basically asking some version of that over and over again. And I try to drill down to get to, okay, this caller believes something. I want to know what it is. And if it's reasonable to believe it, I will believe it too. And so all you need to do is tell me how you know that you're right. When you say things like, I couldn't be wrong, my senses are reliable, you're not even addressing the question, not to keep beating up on Craig. But there's a lot that goes on, and some people, rather than doing that, and this is why I'm happy for Craig to call back and interact another time. I'm happy to have another discussion because Craig is, no matter how unimpressive you might have thought his arguments were, Craig as a person is 100 times more impressive than the people who just spout off in chat and never call in. They got their little snark thing is like, oh, look, I made Matt look, I got to do something, I've got to get some attention or whatever else. Why would I call in and talk to you? You just hang up on me. No, that's a lie. Everybody who watches
Craig
this
got to
show
hang for a while.
Yeah, everybody who watches this show knows that if you can engage honestly, I will take an hour and talk to you. You go to most call-in shows on the planet, you get to call in, you get to state your position in 15 seconds or most, and then they talk about it after they hang up on you off air. Mm-hmm. There are conversations take place, and all the people who are like, why would I call and talk to you when you're in control of the hold and the mute button? You're a coward. That's why you won't do it. And we all know it.
Yep.
And you know it. It's fine. But because of that, it makes the job harder for our moderators. And let me tell you, I greatly appreciate all the people who help out as volunteers. The moderators are great. I almost never have to look at chat. I do some moderating in chat from time to time just because it amuses me for somebody who clearly wanted my attention to get it by just being banned. You got my attention. Congrats. But there's hang on. I have some more super chats. I'm going to put these up while I'm getting ready to announce. Tomorrow, on Translating Collins show, it may in fact be it's going to be Katy and probably Jesse Gender. We are still up in the air on what's going to happen next week. I will not be here for the Sunday show. I'm not sure. I probably won't be here for the Wednesday show either. So there may not be a hang up next week, or if possible, I would love to get like Shannon or somebody to come in and do an episode of the hang up. But I know Shannon's got a lot of stuff going on, and who knows, maybe she could have a conversation with Craig. But Jimmy will be making announcements soon with what's going on next week. And tomorrow on Translating Collins show, they should know a great deal more about it. $10 from No Channel here, bro. This money is exclusively for weed and science books. I got no problem with either one. It's just the union of the two that makes you go, but cells, man. But we have cells, man. And some of the stuff those cells do. Yeah, it's amazing.
And existence
another one to read.
is God.
Yep.
$10 from Great Ski. Hi, Matt and Eve. Great show today. Between hard solipsism and soft solipsism, what is the major differences between the two, and where do you guys fit between the two, and which side are you both on?
Sure. Hard solipsism is the assertion that the natural world that we experience does not exist, that it is a construct, whether it's a construct of my mind or I'm a brain in a vat or being deceived by somebody else. There's no way to tell. Soft solipsism is basically the position that we can't disprove hard solipsism, that I have no way of showing and demonstrating that I exist in the one, or that I am experiencing the one true reality.
Yeah. I'm always going to wind up on the soft side of things.
Yeah. Soft solipsism is, as far as I can tell, just true, that we can't that hard solipsism isn't falsifiable.
Right.
I also, because hard solipsism isn't falsifiable, I couldn't ever advocate for it. And my best argument against any kind of solipsism is that, or the simplest version of solipsism, which is you're all a figment of my imagination, is that I have been every frustrating caller that's ever called the show. And I've managed to teach myself everything I've ever learned, even though I clearly didn't understand it before. I think those are pretty strong responses to the notion that I am the only mind. It's not a good response. It's not a sufficient response to say, maybe I'm a brain in a vat and I'm being fed reality. So there's still some other person out there doing the feeding, which just proves hard solipsism. It just means that the reality I experience isn't ultimately real, but there must be one. And so you get to like Rene Descartes' I think, therefore I am, because I think maybe mine would be, I learn, therefore I'm not alone.
Nice. I like that take. Yeah, I'm definitely on the soft side of that. $10 from Fur Guy, the foot fetishist from 4chan. Is it even ethical to have serious formal debates about flat earth and creationist propositions? Good question.
What would be unethical about it? I mean...
Yeah, I think it needs to be done.
Don't get me wrong. I don't think that scientists who could actually be doing science should be wasting their time on flat earthers and creationists. But those things don't rise to the level of needing actually credentialed active scientists to reply to. They don't. I mean, I love Forrest to pieces. Forrest could dismantle a flat earther or a creationist in a heartbeat, and I'm happy to watch him do it. But you don't even need somebody who knows as much as he does. You need a third grader. And I would like to see debates on flat earth and creationists where the person defending the science is a third grader.
What an amazing show that would be. That would be super fun.
Wait until Inboss gets started and I'll bring in a third grader to debate a flat earther. But yeah, you'd have to go a little further into what you think is unethical about it for me to jump on, because I think there may be an unethical component where you falsely elevate absurdities to the level of science, but I'm against doing that. $10 from Jeff Meager to keep the show going. Love you all. Thank you. You've saved us from having to sell the show to Craig. I was worried. Eve, thanks so much for coming on this week. I loved it.
Thanks for having me.
I look forward to hanging out this weekend.
Yeah.
Have you got anything going on, anything to promote? Where can people find you? Should they go watch you on TikTok, bashing all the theistic stuff and the way that you
Come
do?
on over to TikTok. I'm on TikTok. It's Eve_was framed. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, although I'm not as active. I just pop in to see Jimmy troll people. But yeah, come hang out. I don't have anything major going on right now, but my comment section on Instagram is getting pretty intense if you feel like talking to some theists right now.
Ooh. I will stay away from that because, like I said, I am not just occasionally a lot for some people to take. On some occasions, I've walked into a friend's wall or thread or post and gone after somebody who's, like, in my view, absolutely vile in their repugnant, irrational beliefs that they're promoting. And it hasn't always been received in the way that I'd like it to be received by my friends. So I don't have to go looking for fights. They can come call in here. Once again, huge thank you to Jimmy and to Arden for producing the show. I love at least one of you, but probably both of you in different ways. And thanks again to all of our mods, our co-screener, and to Eve for joining me this week. There probably maybe won't be an episode of The Hang Up next week, but tune into the Transatlantic Call-In Show tomorrow, where I'm sure we'll have at least a slightly better understanding of what's going to happen over the next week. If there's not any show over the next week or so, Jimmy's going to do it because I want to at some point. Somebody's going to say something. He's going to do it because I want to. But I will definitely be back in 2 weeks, and we'll let you know who's going to be here to guest. In the meantime, please take care of each other. Do your best to stay reasonable and rational. Have good reasons for what you believe. And if you aren't able to express those reasons, if you're not yet comfortable enough to say, here's what I believe and I believe it, that's not a bad thing. It just means that maybe you are not ready to be out there trying to defend it. You can, and that's one way to get better at it. But if you are so cocksure that your position is unassailable and trivially easy demonstrations are made to show that you don't even barely understand what it is that you're talking about or how to be rational, that is the exact same path that leads us to flawed understanding of, to tie this back to the beginning, race, gender, and the interactions in our communities, in our society. We can all learn more and be better. It's not just, oh, I don't know enough, so I shouldn't open my mouth at all. No, if you don't know enough, open your mouth, engage, interact, but do it in a way where you're going to learn something and not just in a way where you've got your fingers in your ear going, no, Jesus loves me and this is right and you're wrong and blah, 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 and my senses are unassailable. It doesn't work that way. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.